Debt Real Talk with Bromwich+Smith. Free confidential debt relief consultations.
Well, does debt have you feeling like there's no way out and it may never change? Well, Shawn Stack from Bromwich+Smith is here to discuss the groundhog-like effect with the debt cycle that many are struggling with. Good morning to you.
Good morning to you. How are we this morning?
Pretty decent. Thanks for joining us. Debt. It's not a fun issue to talk about, but there are a lot of people struggling with it in Alberta.
Absolutely. You know, and it's a very difficult conversation to have as well, because we don't really have a language around it. When we start talking about debt, people are thinking, hey, we're trying to borrow some money. So I really applaud you for having me on to talk about this morning.
Okay. What kind of numbers are we looking at as far as Albertans in debt right now?
Well, so, you know, almost everyone carries debt. As far as whether or not they're able to handle that debt, that's a whole different thing. And a lot of Albertans right now are, of course, struggling because there's been a reduction in income, reduction in available hours. And, of course, notwithstanding that we were given some reprieve in making our debt payments, the interest was still being calculated on that debt.
Mm-hmm, that's right. So if you find yourself struggling with debt right now, what kind of advice do you have?
Well, you know, I guess the very first thing, Corey, I think it's really important that we applaud folks that are turning towards that situation, because often when we're dealing with a situation that's stressful and anxiety-inducing, we turn away from it. So the first thing I would do is say, hey, congratulations for having that courage. And the second thing is, you don't have to do it alone. There's people in the community that are available to help. Bromwich+Smith, that's actually what we do, is we help people restructure their debts.
And with restructuring, is that the process you want to get into before something as severe as declaring bankruptcy?
Well, yeah. So bankruptcy is a type of restructuring. It's sort of the very last option, and it's always something that we want to avoid as people. The creditors want to avoid that as well. What we really want to help doing, part of that restructuring is actually creating a budget and sort of looking at what your income is, looking at what your outflow is, and getting to a place where you know where that money's going so that you can make appropriate decisions. And that's where we come in within the community, because we can help set those budgets up. We can help people know where their creditors are and make a settlement with them.
I recently did a budget myself, and it was a bit of a surprise to know that, oh, wow, this little bit here, this little bit there. You also sometimes don't know what is going out. Is that kind of the secret to getting out of debt?
It sure is. I mean, that's part of the secret. And the other part of the secret, to be frank, it's actually taking those first steps. So as you make a budget and you know, you have firsthand experience, it can be kind of overwhelming to sit down to make that budget. But that first step is actually saying, I have a goal that I want to achieve. And that goal is getting out of debt. And once you have that will, then you can turn to the community and say, hey, are there things that you can help me to do this? Like on my website, you're actually able to set up a budget rate on there, which will allow you to visit it weekly or monthly or whenever you want, and it puts cookies on so that you can track that for yourself.
Okay, so cookies in a good way there. Give us another idea of what the community can help us do if we're trying to get out of debt.
Well, I think one of the big things that the community can do is precisely what we're doing here, which is normalize that conversation of debt. I also think that we as a people, we need to be moving away from this concept of simply debt repayment, and we need to move into the concept of debt elimination. We have laws within our society that allow us to restructure and be forgiven of our debts, and it's very important that we're speaking with the folks at Bromwich+Smith and the licensed insolvency trustees to allow us to exercise those rights.
A lot of people may not know that. My last question to you is, if you've had your income reduced and you've got debt hanging over you, how can we make a meaningful impact on our debt?
Well, you know, and that's arguably, my friend, that's what a lot of the problem a lot of Albertans are facing. What we need to understand is that there's promises in life and there's predictions. And when we borrow money, the promise to pay it back is predicated on our income remaining stable and in many ways going up. And if we're unable to do that, that's where these insolvency laws come in and allow us to restructure and make an appropriate settlement of a consumer proposal with the creditors through the help of Bromwich+Smith.
Great, some fantastic insight there. I want to thank you so much for joining us, Shawn.
Well, thanks for having me on.
For more financial advice, you can find a link to Bromwich+Smith at ctvedmonton.ca under Morning Live. Back in a couple.